Welcome. Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
What do you call a sheep covered in chocolate?
This is the longest welcome you've ever had. Chocolate sheep? I don't know.
This is
A candy bar.
Okay.
Happy
my
National
goodness.
Chocolate Day, everybody. Today is the day. A couple days before Halloween, it is National Chocolate Day today. So that's that. My
Candy-
joke, my
candy
intro
bar.
was
Your dad
inspired by
joke.
that.
Was
really good.
inspired.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that.
I
I
like-
think that... Oh, go ahead.
I know. I'm just gonna say I like chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate's good. I also like that if people are watching this right now, they think we coordinated.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is pretty.
I know.
It's pretty crazy.
Like we all walked in green today, and I don't know.
I have two.
It's also like a similar shade of green.
Yeah,
It's not just
it's like a hunter camo
foresty
kind of
green.
Yeah.
that palette.
We're looking good.
We're subtly going lighter.
Yeah, I have two things in my entire closet that are like in this hue, and I wore it today.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Well, we're just in sync.
We're just
very
really
fall.
connected.
Not the boy band, but we are in sync. As per a new tradition that we've started as of
I love
lately is our voicemail. Did we get any, Alex? I'm
We've
always
got a voicemail. We've got one actually on hold as well, but I don't want that to keep you from calling into that number because it's become one of my favorite things, and there's been some
It is
interesting
fun.
things that have happened, and so keep calling. I know
Yes.
Natalie, you ratted yourself out on YouTube last week, so way to go. We know that you were one of the females that called, so thanks for doing that. And today we have another call, but if you want to call us, leave a voicemail. It doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering, as
No.
you've obviously heard
No.
from some of them.
Nope.
The tattoos last week were fun.
Yeah.
But the phone number is 402-885-9930. Just call that number. Leave a voicemail. Ask us about a headline or something you want to suggest. And today we have, without further ado, the voicemail. You guys ready for it?
I think
Ready
so.
or not?
so.
Here we come.
Here we go.
Hey y'all, it's Rachel. I just wanted to call in and say hi. I miss you all. Just wanted to give a quick little life update. My husband and I are due with our first baby in May, so we're very excited. Just wanted to ask you guys a couple questions. Along with that, wanted to see if you guys could guess what the gender is. We already know what the gender is, but want to see what your guesses are, and also if you have any good name ideas. Miss you guys. Bye.
Oh, wow. I was waiting for the godfathers and godmother question. Just really let us
That
down.
made my day.
She still has time.
I miss Rachel a lot
Yeah.
because I'm a little outnumbered on the podcast.
Yes.
But she just like always brought such a great perspective.
Which, if you're listening and you're new to the show,
yes.
Yes.
that was
One of the OGs,
one of our
as we
old-
call
original co-host.
Co-host.
Yeah.
OCs,
Yeah.
I guess.
An OG CO.
Rachel, before Jess was on
Yeah.
the show, and then while Jess jumped on, Rachel was one of our originals, who's now in Arkansas.
Arkansas.
I was hoping that she would have started that a little differently. Like her husband's name is Eric, and we used to always joke at that, and so she could have said, "Hey y'all, Eric got me pregnant,"
Oh, no.
then
We're
it
digressing
would've turned-
hard right now.
and then without
I'm
context.
personally, for one, thankful that she
Rachel,
didn't
they haven't
start-
changed.
start
Rachel,
the
help me
voicemail that
come
way.
back.
But that
I'm
is
very
fun.
grateful that,
is
she had
exciting.
wisdom to not do that.
That's exciting
did.
for both of them. What do you think, Jess? Are
I'm
they
gonna
gonna
go.
have a boy or a girl?
I'm going boy. I am team boy here.
I wish we could reveal that on the podcast. Maybe we can talk to her about that. And
Please call in and
Rachel,
reveal.
call back.
no, we'll like have her back on. and- I don't know. What your team boy? Is that what you said?
I'm going boy.
This is just, I mean, we have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. So, yeah, I'm siding boy. I'm going boy. Yeah, I just got a feeling about it. That's what you say. That's what you say to sound convincing.
You know, I have 3 daughters, so I'm gonna swing towards the girl. I think they're gonna have
All right.
a baby girl.
Okay.
Rachel, who's right?
And the name. What are name suggestions? So
I feel like they're gonna pick
gonna-
any name we pick. She's probably already got an incredible one.
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna try to avoid Kentucky or Arkansas tropes.
Okay.
Like Leroy.
Okay, you do that. don't go there.
don't ruin a name. Okay. Like if that's one of them on their list and they have an Arkansas trope name and they're like, oh no, we can't name him Leroy now.
We
because
chose Leroy already. That's so. That's okay.
Leroy Webb.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry. Sorry to. Yeah, I can't think. Leroy's my choice, I guess.
Rachel and Eric. Okay,
Rachel
what
and Eric.
what would a daughter name for Rachel and Eric be?
Oh my.
I think that they would go with like a biblical name. They're just Rachel's a biblical name. Eric, I don't think it is.
Oh, it's very biblical. Yeah.
I don't remember.
It
that
probably
passage.
means something.
It's in the
very
Apocrypha.
spiritual.
Man, what is the? Do you have one, Jess?
I don't know. I'm just going off like feelings I'm having. Like, but where are those coming from? I keep thinking of Eli or Elijah.
Okay.
I'm getting
These
an,
are the
I'm
days
getting
of
an
Elijah.
email.
That's what I've heard.
I think that they're kind of old souls. Rachel definitely. So I'm gonna go with biblical name. I'm gonna submit Ruth. Ruth Webb.
Why are you laughing about that? I think
Because
it's
Jess laughed, and so I'm like,
I wasn't expecting it. I was like, to me, you're a multiple syllable person.
Yeah.
So I'm just shocked at the one
Ruth.
syllable. Ruth Webb, she's not picking that anyways because she would already have been like Ruth Webb. That's so.
yeah, but it depends on the middle name, you know.
Beatrice Webb.
Yeah.
So a three. Okay.
we
well,
have submitted. Thanks for calling in, Rachel.
oh, that was that made my day.
The classic intro
miss
of
her.
the Hey Y'all, not to confuse with Hey Ya
Yeah.
by Outkast.
But if she's really desperate for names, maybe Bronco Billy Bob. That's a good one.
Is that like a classic Arkansas
I'm also
name?
Yeah.
shocked that you
Walmart?
did not. No one offered their own name because you could have been like
I could see Eric. I mean,
Alexa,
yeah.
Alexis.
Out of any of our names,
Alexandria.
Eric probably would
Yeah,
have
I'd
the
have
best chance.
best odds over here for.
So
Yeah.
What
Well-
about me? What about a girl? You don't think people name their kids? Do
I'm
people-
saying because
Junior, Eric Jr.
yeah,
Oh.
if they went
Yeah.
the junior route, it wouldn't be named after this Eric. I don't think. I think
I mean,
it'd be
I would
the
take it
father
that way.
Eric.
I would take it
you
that
would,
way.
and
Yeah.
that's why she's probably not doing that.
Yeah, but I'm surprised no one said Austin. Really,
That's true.
uh,
Austin is a strong name.
Texas, how far is that from Arkansas?
Texas forever,
close.
baby.
You know, and
Who's the famous person? Scottie Pippen.
Scott. Oh yeah,
That could have
okay.
been a Scotty. Could have been. That's a cute name. I feel like Scotty is cute.
If I would have gone boy, Austin would have been my submission, just in case.
All right.
Okay.
I love Austin.
Big fan of Austin over here. All right. That does it for this portion of the podcast, the baby naming portion of the podcast.
That's fun. I like that somebody asked us that. Just different. That's why I love people that call in.
Yeah. So
If you'd like us to name your baby,
yeah, let us know. We got great ideas here. Just a wealth of knowledge and baby names
I'm
here on the
speechless.
Uncomfortable podcast. All right, up next, we got headlines. Our first headline today comes from CNN.com. It says, "This is Gen Z's favorite restaurant," survey says. It's been a good year for Chick-fil-A. A recent survey ranked it as Gen Z's top restaurant with 15% of respondents listing it as their favorite choice. The annual Piper Sandler study surveyed 14,500 teens in 47 states whose average age was just under 16 years old, 15.8 years old to be exact. Starbucks
specific.
came in second place with 12%, followed by Chipotle at 7%. McDonald's was 6%, and this one just
I know.
surprising me.
Throws me.
3% said
Is it-
Olive Garden.
is it the
Because
free
when you're here,
breadsticks?
your family, I guess.
it probably
Is it the free
family.
breadsticks?
the family.
family feeling.
Or maybe that's where people go, like as families, to dinner.
I mean, you can
Is
do
it
this. You
nostalgic?
can salad and breadsticks.
All you can eat. Yeah, kids
Done.
at younger. I mean, Like my kids were always fascinated with the Golden Corral, and I despise that
And
place.
I guess when did they do this?
It's
If they
like,
did this,
all you can eat. This is crazy.
If
There's
they-
a chocolate fountain. I can put breadsticks in the chocolate fountain.
if they'd submitted this during homecoming season, it could have
Yeah.
pushed people over the edge. You know.
Oh, a
Olive
lot of
Garden's kinda
romantic
that.
dinners happening
Ooh,
at the
yeah.
Olive Garden.
Yeah, I mean,
That's true.
When you're-
I want to know what the 3 states that were left out were, because it's kind of.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with Hawaii and Alaska for 2 of the 3, and then I don't know.
but Chick-fil-A.
Chick.
So if you're looking for a gift card for your granddaughter or grandson this year,
that's a good idea.
Taco Bell's not on there.
Yeah, that's surprising.
It is Chick-fil-A, Christian chicken, as we like to call it.
God's chicken, I thought.
God's chicken, whatever people call it.
I wonder what other ones like in the 2 and 1%. Like I want to know.
You
what
want to
made it
get
there.
down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah,
Really want to know.
I do wonder how many like were on there because 15%. That's probably a pretty high amount. Yeah, so
My kids are strangely obsessed with Jimmy John's. I don't understand it. I mean, I'll eat Jimmy John's. It's fine, but they
Like in a
really get
pinch?
excited
Do they
about
freak?
it. They don't freak out, but they get pretty
'Cause they're
excited.
freaky
about
fast.
It. Yeah.
freaky fast,
Yeah.
sub so fast you'll freak.
There is something about. I mean, I do love that Chick-fil-A sauce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong. All right, our next headline comes from FoxNews.com. It says Michigan woman arrested for failing to scan all items at Walmart self-checkout. When I read that headline, I was like, oh, that could happen to any of us, until I discovered in reading it completely that through surveillance footage, they found that she had stolen more than $1,000 worth of merchandise by not scanning it since April.
So over time.
So she's been kind of doing the every other scan, like, oh, I'd scan this one, not scan
Very
the other.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's got to be happening, obviously, on purpose
Oh.
and accidentally, I would assume mostly. But
So I was a front end supervisor at Shopko back in the day when Shopko was still a thing, and I caught somebody doing this. I mean, multiple times, but
they
like
had self-checkout?
Yeah,
Oh,
self-checkouts.
wow.
Shop go be ahead of their time.
I know, you know.
How are they
Yeah.
not around anymore?
Wow, how'd they go out of business? But I definitely caught somebody like fake scanning stuff and putting it into a tote
Oh, wow.
and trying to carry the tote out. It was like one of the most awkward
Well,
experiences.
There's been like TikTok trends of people saying, I'm going to buy the security camera at Walmart, and they'll like go to a department and like rip the security camera down and then put just a price tag on it from something else and then take it to the checkout. But they'll actually have like a cashier scan it and not even know what they're doing and like buy it.
Oh, my
Security.
goodness.
So there's stuff like that I've seen, but they've said, they say sometimes people will try to swap the barcodes to get a better deal. But they are, this is the thing Walmart is aware of because it is happening. So they're implementing different types of artificial intelligence with cameras and different other technology to try to
Track these people.
to try to
Okay,
make sure
fun
it doesn't
fact.
happen.
If you get caught for shoplifting over $500, it's a felony. And another interesting thing about if you were to steal from a store and get caught, you don't just have to reimburse the items that you stole, but they add up like all the equipment and all the employees' times it took to like go back and find all this lady's info.
Oh, wow.
It's a hefty bill.
In Nebraska, at least.
At least in Nebraska, but it's
Yeah.
a felony across the board anyways, but
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, she
Just took
was
me back.
arrested and charged with retail fraud. So it is a serious thing. I think sometimes, that
It is.
self-checkout maybe gives people this feeling of anonymity where they're like, I can get away with this and no one will ever be able to track it back to me or something. But they're watching.
They are.
They're watching you.
Yeah.
So beware. Don't, be of high integrity. How about that? Then you won't have to worry about this. Omaha.com is our final headline. It says Creighton to stop playing Kanye West songs at athletic events. This one is just on probably the tail end of a
Yes.
whirlwind of Kanye headlines that we probably don't have time to dissect or pontificate on here.
Yeah.
a lot has happened.
He is on a trail of self-destruction right now in the media with anti-Semitic comments and all kinds of other conspiracy theories. And I mean, pretty much anything you can think of, he is kind of just throwing it all out there right now.
And kind of challenging people to challenge him. I mean, not really being apologetic at this point.
And they did. He pretty much said on a podcast that he could say anti-Semitic things and Adidas would never drop him. And then they recently dropped him. The Gap has dropped him. His record label has dropped him. So I am sad about it, but I'm also just curious, like what he thinks he's accomplishing or what he thinks his goal is. He's a guy that I've been a fan of for a long time, so it's one of those things where you try to defend him as much as you can, and now it's just like reached a point of no return where I'm like, there's just no justification for this behavior.
Yeah, you do hope. I mean, when he came out with the gospel albums and was doing a few of those things, I don't think you just go cancel those, obviously, because of it, because there was powerful truths in it. But it is a frustrating. It's a frustrating thing. I feel like anytime, and we've talked about this with other celebrities, Justin Bieber, and when you kind of are like, okay, I'm going to be one of the first people to embrace them, welcome them into Christian culture. We talked about Eminem a couple weeks ago, and then you're like, man, like I thought there was some of the fruit, in your life that we were seeing for a while, and but this seems to digress, a lot of that.
In a lot of these interviews, he maintains the stance that he is a Christian and that he is defending his people, and and he's making comments that I think can border on, okay, well, he's speaking out against abortion a lot. He's speaking out just against culture and negative things, negative influences in culture, whether that's, health issues or the way that black communities are treated, things like that, where it's like, okay, these are things that are important to talk about, but then he couples it and wraps it in this other nonsense that is ignorant and uneducated and, I mean, just harmful, because you're seeing
people reacting.
Well, he's empowering, white supremacists and other people who have anti-Semitic feelings. And I think I saw a thing where the 405 in LA, people were lining up and putting signs up over the overpasses saying Kanye's right and all this stuff. And it's just someone with his clout and his power talking about this and elevating these conspiracy theories that have been long disproven. It's just shocking.
Well, and speaking
dangerous.
Of conspiracy theories, I wonder how much his song about Chick-fil-A led Generation Z to make Chick-fil-A their favorite restaurant. And then our last...
Okay,
hold
Alex,
on.
We've got previous podcasts for you to listen to.
We have also a article from where? Talking about a woman stealing from where? Walmart? And where does Rachel Webb live right now? Arkansas, the home of Walmart.
Okay. I'm not sure I'm seeing the red string as clearly as you are.
And so we all wore the same color today.
Okay, all right. We got to stop this.
We're done.
It's just a wild string of thought here. Set your mind to it.
Or don't.
No. I'm just saying we've seen a lot of celebrities that we've kind of watched their demise happen publicly. And I mean, obviously he is, a lot of people would say like out of his mind right now. And it's also, I just feel like he has a mental illness that's going on, and you can just see it like full fledged, but it also like has just created for me, cause I care a lot about that, but it's also like not an excuse to tear down somebody else, or to, when you have a position of power to do that, it's like your responsibility. And I hope that people close to him are encouraging him to get the help, but it's just, you see that happening, but it also does not in any way justify or take away from the damage that he's doing. So
well, and also just someone in with his position and power, I could imagine someone in his inner circle confronting him, and he would
probably
just
not even
excommunicate that person and just move on, and that's a really scary place to be. But I mean, I think he was worth almost $2 billion and down to $400 million after all of this stuff was taken from him.
Oh wow, I was wondering about that.
So yeah, his net worth is not what it was, and he's got to be feeling the pain from that. But I don't know, maybe he thinks he can rebuild or something. I don't know. There's probably a lot we could tear apart there, but it is sad to see. But I will personally be kind of following it closely to see where this heads. But.
Yeah, and I know like social media platforms have kind of mini shadow banned him or done some of the things like that lately, and it seems like it's just so difficult when these things happen because you're like, how much is media helping build not a brand for him, but put him out there, platform him, and so how much is he? Because we've seen celebrities kind of manipulate that before in some kind of ways, or at least conspiracies about the slap by Will Smith or whatever. Yeah. And that's kind of why I was joking about all our conspiracy, because people will start to hear things like that and put it together, and you're like, draw lines that are like not meant to be drawn, and it seems like he's doing a lot of that lately.
But then also, I mean, it just does show. I mean, Creighton is one school, but it's like we all kind of have a responsibility. Like, how are we going to act and respond? And I can think of Kanye West being played during Creighton sporting events. Like, he has very popular songs that they play during the timeouts, and so that's a big deal. I mean, people will notice that, and so it's like we kind of each have a chance to respond. Yeah, that's how they're doing it.
All right, we won't solve all of that here, but
should they turn the other cheek?
That's a good question. Good segue, Jess. Appreciate that. Next, that's what we're going to be talking about, the famous words of Jesus. What does that mean to turn the other cheek? Turning the other cheek. Matthew 5:39, there's a famous line from Jesus that says, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek. Also, we just got to get right out of the way, clear the air. It's cheeks on your face.
Not a butt cheek.
So just because we got to get those giggles out, or it's going to happen later, Alex is going to just...
Yeah, he's going to...
Or is it? We need to look at the context.
Well, we have Karl here.
Okay.
Dr. Karl Pagenkemper is on the show again. Welcome back.
Is it a cheek or a butt cheek, Karl?
Is it a face
first
cheek
question.
or a butt cheek? The first...
No, it's the one confirmed. Below your eyes.
Okay.
All right.
Well, both
immediately
kind of are, but
okay. Immediately
below your all right. Immediately below your eyes. It's those cheeks.
Okay.
See, we got it out of the way.
Currently all turning red right now.
I'm not.
On us old folks.
This is serious Bible study for Alex.
Yeah, way cool.
Most of his Bible studies involve cheeks. All right. No, but I did think that's something that when you talk about this, it's always the joke that happens is, what cheek do I turn?
It's an English thing because the Greek word refers to the jaw, and the sirgona is a jaw and the cheek. Just right there.
The region.
We all got it.
See, so that's why we have you here.
I know, it's good. It's good to have Karl back on.
It's been a while, yeah.
So Lord help us all.
Welcome back, Karl.
Happy to be back. It's fun.
So, turn the other cheek. What is the immediate biblical context of this quote from Jesus, taken from the Sermon on the Mount? Maybe you're here, Karl. Help us understand this context when we read it. What does it mean?
Sure. I mean, Matthew 5, 6, and 7 of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount starts with the Beatitudes, and you're familiar with them because we've done them a dozen times in church. And then you go through a section where he talks about not abolishing the law, blah, blah, blah. But he gets to a series of what we call the antitheses. That's like, you've heard something said, but I'm going to say this instead. And sometimes he refers to Old Testament texts, and sometimes he refers to traditional laws. And you've heard the ancients say, no, don't do this. But I'm going to say, don't do that. Don't murder, but I'm going to tell you, don't hate. And elevates the standards. So that's the context in which is a series of those things.
Because Jesus is coming to us. I mean, this is like his manifesto of a kingdom that he's establishing, right? And he's saying, this is what life in my kingdom should look like. And these people are used to rules, regulations, and Jesus is raising the bar on each of these things.
He's raising the bar. He is raising the bar. Or I would say he's actually pointing in the natural extension of what the text was meant to be understood as. So don't kill is kind of the bottom bar, but all over the Old Testament you're going to have images of how to be compassionate with one another. So he's going to say it's not even good to hate.
Yeah, and not even just to commit adultery, but he's like, hey, if you do it in your heart, that's where this all begins. And Jesus is seeming to get at the hearts of people.
Something's deeper that's going on here. In this particular case, you're dealing with what's called the lex talionis, the rules for retribution. They're rooted in Deuteronomy, Exodus, Leviticus, about eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And he's basically upholding that, but it's more than that. Because he's going to generalize it. Lex Talionis is designed to do two things. One is to prevent you from going too far first. If Alex, if you and I are having an argument and I suddenly turn off and I pop you in the shoulder and you turn around and pop me in the mouth, I turn around and take a bat to you and you turn around with a knife and I turn around with a gun and next thing I know, you're burning my house down. They're trying to prevent the elevation
or escalation.
The escalation. Thank you. Escalation. The second thing is they're really pointing to Old Testament ideas. There are places to take these decisions, like courts, and the decisions like this should be made with restraint by people who are authorized to do that. So it could be the temple, but you could take them to people so that it isn't you. You don't get the right to take personal retribution. So the implications are always in a community context. So it restrains the people, doesn't just give them permission. Okay, hit you, now go hit him back. That's not really the point. That's why when he gets on and he says, I say to you, don't resist evil person, that kind of stuff. He's starting to elevate to the next level.
Yeah, so let me just read the immediate context of this, because I think most of us know turn the other cheek, but let me read just the immediate context. So some of the things we're talking about may make a little more sense. So this is Matthew 5, begins in 38. You've heard it said, eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand it over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go a mile, then go 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you and do not turn away the one who wants to borrow from you. So that's the immediate context. Because anytime, obviously, we reread Scripture, it's wise to unpack the textual context around it. And then we can start to unpack maybe some of the cultural context around that, which is what you were kind of doing a little bit with the elevation and continuing the retribution, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Because these are familiar. I mean, you're just saying, you've heard it said. So these are familiar sayings that these people are hearing right there.
Yeah,
so.
And they're all over Exodus and Leviticus and Deuteronomy to restrain people from getting carried away with their responses. Retaliation is the idea there.
Yeah. And I think one of the specifics notes here that often we don't talk about inside of this passage is he says, we say turn the other cheek, but there's this idea of a right cheek, being the first one. So if anyone slaps your right cheek, turn to them the other cheek.
Yeah.
Right. And so what would kind of some of the contextual or the context for, a Jewish audience and their understanding between your right and left hand and cleanliness and things like that?
That's right.
Lead us to.
Actually, it's interesting because if the imagery here is very familiar in cultures where insults are easy, ways of getting at people. And one of the ways you insult, and you see them in old movies, like cartoons where they don't like you, so they pull out their glove and they slap you across the face. It's meant to be an insult. So for me to hit Alex on the right cheek, it's not this way because that would hit your left, but it's more this way. It's designed
like
as
a backhand.
Across the mouth.
With your right hand.
With my right hand, because most people are right-handed.
Yeah.
So the implication is that this is not designed to break your jaw. This is designed to insult and put you in your place. You are an inferior. And so they would automatically, and the Jews of the first century, they were well aware of that stuff. The Romans would do that all the time. That's why they're constantly, they could press, you want to carry my stuff for the next mile, please do. They have that authority under that system. So inferior to or superior is really what's going on here in that image. Now, so if you turn the other cheek, which now moves your left cheek toward me, I can't hit you in that cheek again because to hit you backhand would be this hand. That's first of all, that's rude. But secondly, you're now looking at me, and I'm the only place I got to hit you now is like in the nose. Because if I do that again, I whack your nose. There's something unique about that because suddenly I'm treating you like an equal. Believe it or not, from that point of view, all through Jewish thinking, and this is not just true in Israel, but Jewish thinking is that, if we're going to punch face to face, we have to be equals to begin with. Otherwise, this is all about inferior to superior issues. This is not about, fighting. It's not fully about simply violence. It implies violence, but that's not really what he's getting at. So inferior, superior images are going on here. And that colors the idea. So if you turn your other cheek, you know what you've done? You've resisted me. You have said, you can't do that anymore because if I hit you now, it's smacking in the nose. That's culturally a way of asserting, I'm just like you are. You can't do that because I'm not bending over.
Yeah.
And it's really it's an active kind of resistance. That's why you had to wrestle with that word resistance, partially because that's the idea. You are resisting, but you're not resisting with force. You're resisting militantly. That's a serious resistance. That's and this passage gets played out in all kinds of ways. Are we a bunch of patsies? Our objective is just to go ahead and jump in the way of the bullets. No big deal. That's not what he's talking about.
One of the things that sparked this, I guess, inspired this podcast was an article that was written on Relevant Magazine entitled "What Turn the Other Cheek Actually Means," and some of the questions that they pose in there are about, what does this mean when it applies to the practice? Are the case of physical abuse or police brutality? I don't see this one on here, but I think another one that comes up a lot in the same context is self-defense.
Sure.
People talking about concealed carry or something like that. Or go to this scripture or something. Right. What are some of the immediate answers you'd have to some of those questions as we?
This is a rabbit hole that you can go down for a long time, and you have images where we do see Jesus get angry once, and as opposed to everything else he does. I think he's fairly aggressively patient and kind and nonviolent in his behavior. Once he turns over some tables, and in the cleansing of the temple, it's a very symbolic gesture of the cleansing of the temple, which desperately needed. Every Messiah wants to come in and cleanse the temple, and Jesus does do that. But the bigger picture is of self-defense. And here's where I think what we have are broad principles, and then we spend all our time talking about the muddy ones. Is it right for me to use a gun in defense of my own children? And this is very real for early church, because you're going to turn your back on your Christian faith, or I'm happy to remove your child's head from his body. And that has a tendency to be very effective at having people, okay, I'm not going to be a Christian anymore because I really don't want my child to die. I love my child. That's perfectly rational and reasonable. But what we end up is using that as a standard or an example of how this gets muddy. Yes, it gets muddy. And the dominant theory from an ethical point of view is that war is always evil. Sometimes it's less evil than the alternatives. Conflict is always evil. Sometimes it is lesser evil. And I happen to believe in a hierarchical sense of ethics in that regard, because I think sometimes the lesser evil has to be taken. I think the cross proves that.
Yeah,
I can't imagine that Christ's death is a good for anything except for us. It is a bad for him, but it's good for us. So apparently the lesser evil was taken in that case, and we got the benefit. So from a hierarchical ethical point of view, I think we sometimes cram too many examples into this thing, and they're all muddy. Yeah. When's it appropriate to go to war? And just war theories have been formed as a result. And that's why I said this can go down a rabbit hole really deep, fast.
So I'm curious, Jess, from a counseling point of view, obviously I think one of the dangers of the scripture, and maybe why a lot of people understand it or know it out of the context and maybe use, hey, just turn the other cheek, can lead to, obviously, emotional abuse, physical, because people use it outside of just a physical type of thing. Just like, just keep going, let people continue to abuse you. So for you, like in a counseling kind of context and world, like have clients ever come in with maybe this kind of an understanding, from a religious background, and you've had to kind of unbury them out of maybe some of the baggage that they have with the false understanding of that and authority and kind of, because they're a lesser, or they see themselves as a lesser, maybe a child or a spouse, that they've just allowed themselves to, kind of do damage by misunderstanding this scripture.
I think that's a great point. It's just it's usually like our ideas and our understanding of how we are today come from our past experiences religiously, what we've seen. And so I think a lot of times, like when I'm in a counseling session with somebody, I call it like unraveling. So you're like looking back at like thoughts that you've had or ideas that you have around or context around something, and like, let's unravel this a little bit. And it's not just like for their benefit. I mean, that's part of it, but it really is when you stop and look at these kind of things and not accept them or choose to look at them another way, you're really part of breaking a cycle. I see like us digging into something like this is even things I've experienced in my own life. It's like you are putting up a proverbial shield and you are shielding your future generations from experiencing maybe or accepting some of the things that you have. And one of the things that I don't think talked all the way through with the striking of the hand that this article does a really good job of, and I've researched this more too, is when you strike with your right hand, that is like punishing a servant, it's demeaning. But then there's also talk about you're turning your left cheek so that someone would have to hit you with their left hand. And that is the hand that back in that time was used for unclean acts. And so in a way, it's symbolizing if somebody were to hit them again and you hit your other cheek, it's literally acknowledging that they are doing something unclean, that they're doing something wrong. And so I think that that's the place we get to first is what does turn the other cheek mean? It's not saying we're being passive or we're letting somebody harm us. It's like when we do that, it's saying you're doing something wrong. Are we going to do this again? And I think in a way, maybe it's challenging to them, but it's also validating to us. And so I think in this, it's when we read this, we hear a lot of like, oh, well, Christians are so passive and this is a passive thing. You just take whatever you're given. But it's like, man, this is validating. And so a lot of times will start with that where it's like, what does this mean? What do ideas like this mean? Where do we come up to this idea? And I think it's good when we talk and break this down because we can trim some fat off of what we add to it from our experiences and maybe I think purity culture and maybe like the 2000s of what we've experienced through different maybe negative influences spiritually. I don't know. It kind of lets us begin that journey. So I would say I definitely let's dive into why we are thinking these things.
There's words that come to mind like patriarchy, but I'm hesitant to drop that too hard because this audience here is going to be across the board in those things. But a hyper patriarchal system demeans and can. It doesn't have to, but it certainly can. And it has the opportunity to in ways. So particularly with women that have been abused, the feeling almost I'm responsible or I'm ashamed of myself, and blame, which seems completely out of. That's why to some of the passages like this, it almost doesn't apply. I mean, because all over the Old Testament, defending the helpless is a high honor for the people of God. So when we're not doing that, this passage, it feels like it's missing the point of much of the expectation of the Old Testament.
Well, and I think outside of just a physical nature of this, I think that term, has headway in other cultural places. I was reading an article even today, just kind of searching for that term in the news section, of Google, and I came across an article even talking about Kanye West, who we talked about a little bit earlier, and the writer of this article, her name is Lovey Ajaya Jones. She says, hate speech against Jewish people is awful and we cannot ignore it. We cannot dismiss it as him as trolling. We cannot just turn the other cheek about it. When people tell us, just ignore Kanye, he's just a troll, he's just trying to get attention, we cannot simply just turn the other cheek. And so I think even in cultural contexts like that, it kind of can take leverage of this idea of like, just ignore it, be passive about it, let it continue to roll off like, whatever like a water off a duck's back or whatever that is. And so I think it can move us to that idea outside of just an abuse situation, but it's kind of got root in culture for just, be the bigger person, don't ignore someone. And it's kind of like one of our catchphrases.
a
Yeah,
little
for
bit.
sure. when it's just kind of ignore something and it'll go away.
There's that
almost.
wonderful passage in Proverbs, right back to back. One says, "Don't answer a fool according to his folly." You just elevate him, or answer a fool and take a 2x4 to him. And you got those two verses back to back. The implications are each situation is kind of unique, and you have to make some judgment calls under the guidance of the Spirit and others that are around you. When's it time to swing back and say, that's foolish talk? That's foolish way to think. And sometimes you ignore it. Sometimes it goes away, and sometimes it just doesn't. And I think we see some of this going in our culture right now in political realms. But this isn't the place for that. But I do think that sometimes that mindset is at work. It really is.
So when we're talking about this, when it is in the sense of passivity or nonviolence, how do we make those distinctions? Because I feel like I've heard this argument go extreme the other way as well, where when someone is defending self-defense, whether it's gun rights or things like that, and they get really excited about the idea of, well, I have the right to fire back, and maybe a little overzealous with that sentiment. Like, how do we balance that? Because even as we're preparing for this episode, you're looking at different takes on it, and sometimes you can kind of, it's one of those things where people are going to manipulate it to their own service. They're gonna get their point across either one way or another. But how could we kind of speak to this? Like, sometimes nonviolence or passivity is the right choice.
Yes.
But how do we define that?
The truth of the matter is there is no specific rule set here.
Yeah.
There really isn't. The early church, and I go there because that's kind of my world, and I realize we've moved on since
Not just
then.
because you're older. You
Yeah,
weren't around
it was
then,
my
but
old.
you
I was
studied it a
around
lot.
2,000 years ago, yeah. You may call me Ye. Old is what the other. No, in the early church, did never, it cannot imagine the amount of power that Christians have in society today. You got 10 people, 20 people meeting in a house church, and they're thinking, I wish the Romans would be nicer to us. Maybe we can pass a law. It's not happening. They're just trying to figure out how to get along. They have no conception of the influence that Christians have in our society. That never occurred to them. However, by the time the rapid growth, by the time you get to about the 3rd, 4th century, and Constantine, on the scene in around 320s, you're starting to see that they're going to turn Christianity into a legal religion. Now, that's really important because what happens is until that time, Christians were deeply divided on whether you could be in the military or not, for instance. And the reason was because how can you Christianly kill someone?
Yeah.
If you have seen a war recently, they do things like run you through with spears and take off your arms and brutal.
Yeah.
And they didn't see that as something that was Christianly. And so they were deeply divided. Now, that said, Christianity spread because of the military, along with a bunch of other things like Mithraism and other things. But military was going everywhere, and they tend to take their faith with them. And you could track where Christianity goes by watching the military move. So it goes with them. But the Christians who were in it were deeply divided, and a lot of Christians said, stay out of it. But once Constantine comes along and actually establishes the beginnings of a Christian empire, guess what? It's hard to justify war out of the New Testament. So we start to see the Old Testament become more important again because Israel went to war, and they were told to go to war. And so theories of war, just war theory, that's where this discussion eventually heads. I don't want to run that, but that's how it happens. So we're 2,000 years down the line trying to figure out rules by which to engage conflict. And what's right, what's wrong. And for the most part, most of the time guns rights are thinking about how do I protect myself and my family. I get it. I want to protect myself and my family. I don't happen to think a gun is necessary to do that for me, but I get it, and it is the way it is in our Constitution, and I'm not against that idea. Sometimes the guy across from you has a bigger gun than you do. By the way, the military always has a bigger gun than I do. If I'm afraid of them, guess what? I can't buy their bombs. They're just bigger than I am. So I have to. And now that's my posture on this stuff. So I'm a little reticent to talk too far about gun rights. But I mean, this is where this stuff goes. Most of this is personal.
Yeah.
This is personal violence, and passivity is not the same as nonviolence. The posture here of this guy here to turn the other cheek is actually a belligerent resistance without being violent. So Walter Wink, who that article applies to, looks at it, is thinking of a third way, which is a way of, we'll call it militant nonviolence. We're going to resist you because and we need to find another way. And just war theory, it ends up going to say, we don't go to war unless it is the last option. Yeah. And it has to be contained, and the idea of war inside with a just war approach just ends all the rest of that stuff. That gets pretty hairy. So, yeah, that's why I say this can go down a rabbit hole. So I really don't want to swing at my neighbor.
Yeah, because sometimes I think it comes because Christians could tend to maybe have a reputation for being passive or weak or feeble or whatever, and so then you have this other side of Christianity that's going, well, I don't want to be seen that way, and it's almost a threat to their masculinity.
Muscular Christianity.
Yeah, you know, and so it's one of those things where, well, no, we're actually tough, like you know what I mean, and it's just I don't know that it's. I think you kind of lose sight going too extreme of either argument. You know?
30, 40 years ago, you'd have these big guys built like oxes come in and tear phone books. And you can be like
the
Jesus
power
and
team.
Like me, the power team. Yes. That kind of craziness. Or guys who were specialists in certain aspects of martial arts. And no, I'm happy. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
But is that define what Christianity would be for me? Jesus would have been a power guy. Really?
Yeah.
Well, I think that those words, like you said, passivity and nonviolence not equaling the same thing, because obviously his ministry and leadership wasn't just like a passive one. You brought up the example of him flipping over the tables, which I think, that's a whole nother discussion on what does righteous anger look like and all that. But Jesus, when he corrected his disciples, it wasn't just like it wasn't just like, just do whatever you want, run over me, he had direct words to say for people, and direct words to say, to a king that wanted to have him killed. I mean, it was a nonviolent approach, but he wasn't just whatever. Who do you say I am? That question, and then defining who he was and calling himself God. That wasn't just like a passive, like, hey, this is the easy way out kind of approach. It didn't lead to passivity. It led to, and I think you have examples that people want to maybe jump on to this whole idea, because Peter, when Jesus is being arrested, people kind of take, I think from a pacifist, point of view, take, Peter chopping off the ear of the soldier that wanted to arrest Jesus, and Jesus putting it back on him. They kind of pair these two together and would point towards like Jesus is echoing, and obviously clearly his mission is a nonviolent mission and a passive mission. And so I think when we look at the whole canon of that kind of stuff, how do we start to, I guess, figure out what's different between just retaliating, protection, pacifism, nonviolence? Like, how do they all meld together, but how are they separate ideas as well?
And I don't know if I'm simplifying it, but like from what we're saying, I'm hearing that in this, Jesus isn't promoting violence necessarily, but this is anything but passive. It's almost saying, because I think we naturally go straight to violence. Like even when you're giving descriptions of Alex, it's like, or between the illustration between you and Alex, it's like, okay, we automatically think of violence. But I think in it, I'm hearing that there's another option.
Right.
And by saying, okay, I'm not going to be violent, I'm not passive, but there are other options. And so they had other options then. And if I'm applying this to myself, it's, okay, you hit me, I don't necessarily need to hit you, but what can I do? Yeah. And that, I don't know, I think it starts getting muddy when we pigeonhole it into like very specific situations, which I think we kind of want to do, or like specific things. But I'm looking at what's the message. And to me, I'm hearing it's not violent. It's anything but passive. Right. But there's a third option. There's other. Right.
You don't get to take up arms against somebody just because they're angry with you. And so
is it the safest thing? I'm sitting here like thinking about,
even preemptive war ideas ought to give us a lot of pause. Without pointing fingers to the East these days, watching some of the church in the military situation right now bless missiles and offer absolution for those who would die on behalf of the cause. That gives me echoes of crusade that may frighten the daylights out of me. And that's coming from church authorities in the conflict that we got going on in Ukraine right now. So I'm freaked out by that idea. That's where it can go. Is there such a theme as redemptive violence? And I think that's mostly a myth. I think all violence is bad. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary because there's no other option.
Well, I think retaliation is maybe not for you all, but it's a natural desire, usually for myself, when whether it's violence or non-violence. It's in even my marriage. If my wife does something or says something, like there's something within me that just longs to retaliate, as quickly as I can when I'm hurt. And I think there's an old adage, hurt people, and I think it's true. It's part of our fallen nature is to retaliate, or if it's a sport, if it's whatever, we see that kind of mindset just play out in who we are. And so how do we take like the principle and this maybe desire as humans to retaliate? Is there something that we can learn about that third way, that third option that Jesus is trying to present here, that is different than maybe what our longings are, or because I think retaliation isn't always bad. Part of it is, I think, a longing for justice, which I think is right. God has given us, right. And a longing to make things right. And the problem becomes when we think, responding in the same way, hurting somebody actually begins to make it better, and usually it doesn't make the situation better. It blows it up and makes it worse and create, at least in arguments I've been in. So how do we start to look at that third way, that option that Jesus is trying to show us in this retaliation type of world? Because I think that's ultimately what they were looking for in a Messiah, was a Messiah that was going to come retaliate on their behalf for all of the mess that the Roman Empire had done, and all of the exile that everything that this people had gone through, this Jewish people. They were hoping that a Messiah was going to come and pull out the Rambo gun and just like blow everybody up. And I think that's a natural longing and desire through justice for us.
There's no doubt that one of the things that gives us hope about the justice of God is that he will even-handedly deal appropriately with evil, that we cannot, because we're not omniscient, and I don't know all the details. But even in this case, if he asks you for this, go ahead, give him that. It'll just show him how big he really is, because now you took my clothes. Typically the language of take your shirt, how much does a guy actually wear? Well, he has a loincloth, he has a shirt, kind of like a nightshirt, and he has a cloak. And he probably got some shoes and maybe a couple of things. That's it. And you take a shirt, and he says, give him your clothes. Jesus just said, see, I want to run around naked? And that's not, he's intentionally trying to say you need to find another way out of this thing. So back to things like blessed are the peacemakers, because you de-escalate. You don't escalate. And very rarely does retaliation ever feel even. It just doesn't. So getting back again, if I'm at the plate and somebody hits me with a ball, guess what's going to happen next inning? Some pitcher on the other side is probably going to find someone to bean. It's just like, we're not backing down. I guess my reaction is, cool, you don't need to do that. Play the darn game, because the winning is going to be in the score. And are you trying to be intimidating? We're not intimidated. We'll intimidate back. Jesus' point is, Prince of Peace, blessed are the peacemakers, those who de-escalate. Competition's fun, but that elevates it. So, yeah, and it could just be in my relationship with my kids or my wife. If she says something that feels a little off and I need to swing back, I tend to be a 9 on the Enneagram. I tend to be a peacemaker. I tend to de-escalate things. And when things are too quiet, I tend to stir them up. That's my flip side. So, but on the whole, I think the peace as a love, joy, peace, patience, a fruit of the Spirit language, it's all over the place in the New Testament. So I don't know any other way than to start with me.
Do you feel like this is a spiritual principle? like, because I'm thinking like this could be like a spiritual principle, like one of the things that, you know, somebody could really like have is like, as a Christian, like this is like one of my top 5 things, or is it like more in the area of a situational thing where we come up against conflict and then it applies? You know what I mean? Because I feel like there's like, this is something that you could apply to your way of life. I'm just thinking about like, even like explaining this to my kids. So I'm trying to like here in my like childlike faith, think of like, how do I apply this very simply? Because I think we are up here and we can kind of like deconstruct the passage a little bit of what it means. But I'm thinking like, how am I applying this? Is this like a principle like of life? Is this like Jesus is saying like, hey, this is like part of building your foundation, like pour it over here and add this into it? Or is this like, okay, this is happening, Jesus teaches me this?
Well, I think my immediate response is you may be chasing a rabbit here, because it's a
maybe that's what it
distinction
feels like.
without much of a difference. I mean,
it is.
It does have a reality in both cases. Look, children are just as likely to want to get back to, and they don't have a whole lot of filters or a lot of impulse control. And part of parenting is helping them to decide what the right thing to do is. And you hope when they get to be 28, they have figured out how not to do that. Maybe much earlier. Just depends on the child. But but I think also when you go directly into a conflict point of view, what's your point? So those that specialize in peacemaking as a discipline, when there's conflict, who goes in to moderate? And there's a discipline that people you can study at Northwestern University if you like on that issue of how to de-escalate and find ways to negotiate it down, turn the volume down, and get back to the real problem. The hardest things we have in our culture right now is to accept loss, especially in the ballot box. So what we do is we start off and say, if I lose, you obviously cheated. I've predisposed the outcome. If I win, it's obvious. And it's going on both sides of the spectrum right now. It's both ends of the spectrum. If I lost, it's because you cheated. We have a hard time accepting defeat, and part of an essential area of living in a society is the willingness to trade off who's right and who's going to lead. And when the people that I want to lead don't lead, I don't get the right to take up a gun and shoot them or whatever. So I mean, that's the essential part of democracy. That's where, so peacemaking functions at all kinds of levels, including politics and how I get along with my neighbor.
Yeah, I shared this last week in our staff development. My son the other day was in the back of the car, and he was like, and I won't share the names of the 2 politicians, but we'll just say they're part of opposing parties. And he was like, why are they both bad people? And I'm like, what? Like, where do you get that from? And he's just seen so many ads lately and yard signs and things like. So the only thing he knows about these 2 politicians in our state, or one's a politician right now. I guess they're both politicians. One is an incumbent, and the other is taking this person. They're just nothing good about these 2 gentlemen, right? And I've even seen in some of the debates lately, the moderators will try to say, "Hey, we've been bashing each other. That's just politics. Could you say something nice?"
Right.
Like, what's admirable about this person?
Right.
And it does seem like in this type of world, a political landscape, that this is almost an impossible thing, for us to even take these principles and say, no, I'm going to lead towards peacemaking rather than because it's like, I was going to. I started out my campaign as somebody that was a really nice guy, and I wasn't running any smear campaign. Like, we just hear that over and over, but then they just kept doing it, and so I had to
me do it.
and so it just becomes this rhetoric, and then we justify, like, at first we're like, yeah, see, my guy wasn't, or gal wasn't doing the smear campaigns. They're way better. They're more humble, and then it's like, no matter what, it always ends up there, and then we justify like that person's use of just politicking for well, they did it and it wasn't as bad, they didn't punch as hard, or they had it coming to them. And I think that is a very relevant place that we're seeing this impossibility, and where we long for a third way. I think as Christians, like not even just as Christians, I think as Americans, we long for that third way where it's not just people beating up and battering each other. Where we're like, we want the only path forward isn't this.
Yeah. We live. What was Jonathan Haidt? It was the exhausted middle. We're so exhausted because we don't think anybody's listening because the loud guys are on the end. And negative attack ads work. They work. And so you can tell who's the bad guy because of the colors on the ad. And you watch the news at nighttime and you try to stay up late enough to watch Stephen Colbert. Do you watch Stephen Colbert? Occasionally.
I catch the clips on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. You catch the clean clips. The ads that are posting around the news at the 10 o'clock news are unbelievable. And I can't watch news anymore. I'm tired. I'm exhausted from that. So yes, how do you de-escalate that? Somebody has to start, and right now nobody is, and because it costs too much to start because I lose.
Yeah. Well, in the moment you try to find the middle ground, people on both sides are going to say that you are abandoning your party or whatever, and you love the other party. Yeah,
the love of allegiance is most important, above affection and love for both.
And honesty.
Love your enemy. That's coming up next, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think in all of this, I mean, in all of this discussion that we've had, this passage, I mean, to me, what I'm hearing is it's Jesus calling us to a higher place, and we can try to whittle it down and fit it into a box that applies to us that we can use in our own personal attack ad against somebody else. But really, it's Christ calling us to a higher place and saying, that option, that third option, that's more challenging, that's more difficult, that's more going to be more humiliating potentially. That's the one I want you to take.
And I think that's what Christ calls the church to do. One, to be peacemakers, and two, you know what? You're going to get beat up once in a while.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Me too.
Yeah,
right.
That's
his.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, if you think you've gone through it, trust me, I've been there. That kind of posture that Jesus has. It's okay. I've been there. I get it. Nobody was more misunderstood than Jesus himself. So if I feel misunderstood.
There it is. All right. Well, thanks, Karl, for being here. We always appreciate your time on this stuff. It brings a lot of clarity to it. I mean, it honestly does. I think anytime that we can dive a little deeper into these things that seem like throwaway tropes that we, sometimes just wear as wear on our sleeve, there's a deeper meaning to it, and we can all be called to a higher place through Christ. So again, appreciate your time. And thanks to everyone for listening wherever you are. If you have any questions or concerns, you'd like to reach out to us, you can do that by our Instagram account at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can send an email directly to us at podcast@cccomaha.org. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.